High Commander Vorak Tel stood at the forward command console of his flagship, Vrithar, eyes fixed on the holographic projection of Earth rotating slowly in space. His four mandibles clicked together in a mixture of distaste and anticipation. The planet below was primitive, unshielded, and defenseless. At least, that's what the Xarn intelligence told him. The Xarn had conquered countless worlds before, their advanced technology and brutal tactics making short work of any species that dared to resist. But this, Earth, was different. A younger, weaker species with divided nations and archaic weapons. It should be an easy conquest, a few short weeks to subdue them, and then the planet would be ripe for exploitation. The planet's broadcasts were primitive, filled with the chaotic noise of a species struggling with its own demons. At least that's how Vorak saw it. It had been weeks since the fleet arrived on the outskirts of Earth's solar system, and his fleet was prepared to initiate a strike. Earth had no meaningful defenses to speak of, no planetary shields, no defense grid, nothing. Their so-called militaries were scattered, outdated, and largely uncoordinated. Their most formidable weapon, a series of nuclear missiles, were relics of an old war they had long since outgrown. "Commander," came the voice of his communications officer, a sharp and efficient Xarn named Cathar. "We have completed our final scans. Earth's military response is negligible. We are clear to initiate orbital bombardment." Vorak Tel's claws twitched in approval. "Proceed," he ordered, his voice cold and assured. A fleet of Tarn dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, their sleek, metallic forms cutting through the clouds like arrows, leaving trails of vapor in their wake. These ships were designed for precision and speed, capable of landing anywhere on Earth's surface without resistance. The initial assault would target key military bases and major cities. Their superior numbers would overwhelm any opposition before humanity could even think of mounting a defense. But Vorak Tel was not concerned. He had seen this before, species that spoke of pride and defiance, only to bow before the might of the Xarn war machine. The humans, like countless others before them, would crumble. It was simply a matter of time. As the drop ships neared the planet's surface, Vorak Tel leaned back in his command chair, his four eyes scanning the holographic readouts of Earth's cities. His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, the vibrations creating a soft hum. The war would be over before it had even truly begun. But as the first wave of Tarn forces made contact with Earth's atmosphere, something unexpected happened. The signals, once simple, began to shift. Patterns that were supposed to be static started to change. The human response was fast. Too fast. "Sir," Cathar's voice cracked with sudden uncertainty. "There's an unexpected increase in resistance. It appears." He paused, recalculating data. "They're already coordinating a response." Vorak Tel's antennae twitched, annoyed. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Their forces are fractured. We are well beyond their reach. Initiate ground assault now." But the Xarn's certainty was beginning to crack. As Vorak watched, his screens began to flash with reports of human activity. Large swaths of soldiers and civilians mobilizing with incredible speed. The humans were already fighting back, but it didn't make sense. How were they managing this? Vorak clenched his fists. He'd seen species fall before, but this was not how it was supposed to happen. "Their desperation is their weakness," he muttered, though the words tasted bitter on his tongue. The ground forces began their assault in earnest, but as they touched down, they were greeted not with surrender, but with a series of calculated, near-immediate counterattacks. Earth's soldiers, it seemed, were everywhere, fighting not with the coordinated might of an empire, but with sheer chaos and unpredictability. It was something Vorak had never seen before. He stood up from his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't a species on the brink of extinction. This was something new, something dangerous. The first reports of casualties from the Xarn forces started coming in. Vorak's jaw clenched, the sharp edges of his teeth grinding together. Earth was proving to be much more of a challenge than anticipated. And it had just begun. Vorak-Tel paced the command bridge of the Vrithar, the holographic screens before him flashing with a growing stream of troubling data. He'd expected resistance, some defiance, but nothing like this. His drop ships were being ambushed by coordinated, guerrilla-style attacks that no species as primitive as humanity should be able to execute. Makeshift explosives, jamming devices, and ground forces springing up from nowhere were crippling his units at an alarming rate. "Sir, we've lost contact with the 34th and 51st Assault Units," a communications officer reported, his voice tight with panic. "It appears Earth has mobilized their full reserves. We've encountered civilians, sir. Armed civilians." Vorak's mandibles twitched, his irritation growing. Civilians? This is absurd. They should be cowering in their cities, not fighting back. His claws dug into the metal of the chair. "Cathar, what is the status of the ground forces?" Thar's voice was cold, a sharp contrast to the rising chaos in the room. "It's as we feared, Commander. The human forces are scattered but efficient. They are using their cities as traps, laying ambushes with old technology, cars, trucks, motorcycles. They're using the terrain to their advantage. Our dropships are easy targets in urban environments." Vorak-Tel's eyes narrowed as he scanned the reports. These were tactics that should have been out of Earth's reach. How could a species so technologically inferior adapt so quickly? He had assumed their primitive weapons, small arms, grenades, rudimentary explosives, would be laughable against his superior forces. Instead, those same weapons were causing severe losses. A new report flickered across the screen. "Sir, human combat drones are engaging our transports," the officer said, his voice cracking. They're small, but they're equipped with projectile weapons that are causing significant damage to our hulls. They seem to be targeting weak points with precision." "Impossible," Vorak growled. "These humans can barely build a proper aircraft. How are they using drones?" He looked to Cathar for an answer, but the officer was as stunned as he was. The drones, primitive, makeshift creations, should not have been able to pierce the Karn armor. A new message from Earth's military command flashed on the screens. Earth Command requests a ceasefire for diplomatic talks. They are offering a surrender. Vorak-Tel laughed bitterly. "A surrender? They think they can negotiate. These humans." "Commander," Cathar interrupted, "you need to see this." Vorak strode over to the communication console, where Cathar was pulling up a live feed. The footage showed a convoy of human trucks, cargo trucks, not military vehicles, moving through a dense urban area. The trucks stopped, and soldiers emerged from behind them, wearing mismatched armor and using older firearms, but their tactics were deadly. They set up ambush points at key intersections, drawing Xarn forces into traps, where homemade explosives and hidden sniper nests tore apart entire patrols. "This is not just disorganization," Vorak said, his voice low and filled with frustration. "These humans, they're using their environment as a weapon." "They've adapted faster than we predicted," Cathar said, a hint of awe in his voice. "They're using old tech, but in ways we can't anticipate." Vorak-Tel clenched his claws. The humans were learning faster than he could predict. Worse, they were relentless. A species that had survived centuries of internal conflict and wars between their own factions seemed to thrive on the chaos rather than collapse under it. "They are clever, but this is only the beginning," Vorak-Tel said. "We will crush their cities. We will burn their resistance to the ground." But even as he said it, a sinking feeling gnawed at him. He had underestimated them. And now, Earth was proving to be more than a target. It was a battlefield where their survival instincts were rewriting the rules of war. "Prepare for full-scale planetary invasion," Vorak snapped, trying to regain his composure. "We'll show them what real power looks like." But in the back of his mind, the nagging thought wouldn't go away. How long could his fleet hold out against a species that was learning, adapting, and fighting with everything they had? Vorak Tel stood before the war map, his 4 eyes scanning the ever-shifting data streams. His fingers drummed on the console as new reports flooded in, each one worse than the last. The humans had already adapted to the Xarn tactics in ways no one could have predicted. What had started as isolated pockets of resistance was quickly becoming an organized, cohesive effort. The Xarn were used to fighting species that crumbled under pressure, that failed to adapt, that cowered when faced with superior force. Yet, Earth's defenses were more resourceful than he had anticipated. Guerrilla attacks were now coordinated in ways that defied all logic. The humans had no single leadership structure to target. Instead, they were using their fractured world to their advantage, spreading their command across multiple locations, adapting as quickly as their enemies did. "Commander," Cathar's voice cut through his thoughts, "we've encountered another unexpected problem. Their resistance has gone mobile. It seems they're using civilian vehicles, buses, trucks, even motorcycles, equipped with weaponry to stage hit and run tactics. Our supply lines are being harassed by them constantly." Vorak Tel's claws dug into the armrests of his chair, his rage boiling over. "This is madness. We are the Xarn Dominion. We should have crushed them in the first few days. How are these things still standing?" Cathar hesitated, then spoke with surprising caution. "It's not just that, Commander. These human tactics, they're more than just desperation. They're strategic. We've seen them use their cities to funnel our troops into ambush zones. They're engaging us in uneven terrain where our superior numbers and technology are neutralized. The enemy knows exactly how to force us into bad positions." Vorak's mind raced. The humans were doing more than resisting. They were setting traps, luring the Xarn into drawn-out engagements they couldn't win. They had begun to use their environment, rural backroads, dense urban areas, even the natural landscape, to outmaneuver the Xarn's overwhelming technological advantage. A fresh report appeared on the screen. Xarn 14th Division has been ambushed near New York City. Over 300 casualties, and our forces are pinned down. He could no longer dismiss it as mere coincidence. The humans weren't just adapting. They were actively learning how to exploit the Xarn's own weaknesses. Vorak Tel's mandibles clicked in irritation, but beneath the surface, there was a spark of recognition. The humans were displaying the very qualities that made them dangerous: resourcefulness, creativity, and a relentless refusal to bow. They were fighters. Perhaps not in the way that Xarn fought, but in their own chaotic, unpredictable manner. They were proving to be more formidable than anyone had imagined. "Redirect the 6th and 9th Assault Regiments to eliminate pockets of resistance in major cities," Vorak ordered, trying to sound authoritative, though his confidence was wavering. "Increase bombardment efforts. We'll wipe their cities from the face of the planet. Show them what happens when they challenge the Xarn." He paused, then turned to Cathar. "Prepare for orbital strikes on their command centers. If their resistance is decentralized, we'll decimate their leadership, break them down at the core." Cathar hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Understood, Commander. But there is one more thing." "What?" Vorak snapped, his patience wearing thin. "We've received a communication from their military. They're offering a ceasefire." Vorak's jaw clenched. "A ceasefire? After all this, they think they can negotiate with us." "It seems so. They claim to want a diplomatic solution," Cathar replied, voice cold and flat. Vorak Tel chuckled darkly, though the humor was lost on his officers. "They want to negotiate. Their cities are on fire, their armies are crumbling, and they think we'll listen to talks. Ridiculous." He looked at the data again, each new wave of human defiance only fueling his fury. "Reject their offer. Send a message to their leaders. Surrender, or we will wipe them from the stars." But even as he gave the order, doubts gnawed at him. He had assumed the humans were weak, broken by their own internal conflicts. But they weren't. They were survivors. And now, He was the one who felt as if he was trapped in a war of his own making. The battle for Earth raged on, but the Xarn forces were beginning to falter. Their once unshakable confidence had turned to frustration as the humans adapted with remarkable speed. Vorak Tel watched with growing dread as each new report revealed another unexpected turn in the conflict. The humans, seemingly incapable of conventional warfare, had instead mastered the art of asymmetrical tactics. They used their cities as labyrinths, their highways as deadly traps, and their forests as fields for guerrilla warfare. Small, nimble human forces had taken down entire platoons with nothing more than homemade explosives and quick strikes. But it wasn't just their cunning on the ground that was troubling. The humans had found a way to fight in the skies too. Vorak Tel sat in his command chair, his claws resting against the cold metal as a new report came in. "Commander, we've encountered an anomaly. Human combat drones. They're unorthodox, but highly effective." Drones. Vorak Tel's voice was laced with disbelief. These creatures can barely fly their own planes, and now they're using drones to fight us. How could they have the resources to? He was interrupted by Cathar, who was looking at the screen with growing concern. "Sir, these are not just drones. They're modified drones. Human engineers have reverse-engineered one of our own designs, a standard Xarn surveillance drone, and outfitted it with explosive charges. They're small, but they're using them with surgical precision." Vorak's mandibles ground together in frustration. How could they have gotten their hands on a surveillance drone? He had assumed their forces were so technologically inferior that even scavenging alien tech was beyond their reach. But clearly, he had underestimated them once again. The report continued, detailing a daring raid on one of the Xarn's primary supply depots. Human fighters, using the repurposed drones, swooped in from above, setting off devastating explosions that ripped apart heavily armored transports and left several divisions in disarray. "This is unacceptable," Vorak growled, his fury boiling over. "They've stolen our technology and turned it against us. But how?" Cathar hesitated before responding. "Their scientists, Dr. Ayana Patel, for example, have been working quickly to reverse-engineer everything we've left behind. They're using our tech against us, adapting at a rate we didn't predict." Vorak Tel slammed his fist onto the armrest, shaking the console. "These humans, they don't even have the decency to die like other species. They fight, they adapt, and they learn." As the tactical map shifted, Vorak noticed something else. Earth's forces were beginning to operate with surprising coordination. No longer were they a fractured, disorganized group. There were whispers of an underground network, a collective force of resistance that spanned the globe, uniting even the most divided nations. It wasn't just military units fighting anymore. Civilians were involved too. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't their weapons or their technology, Vorak Tel murmured to himself. It's their unity. It's their spirit. Cathar, sensing his commander's unease, stepped forward. "Sir, if we don't act now, they may gain the upper hand. Their resistance is becoming more organized. They are learning how to fight our way." Vorak turned to face his officer, his face hardening. "Then we shall learn their way as well. We'll crush them at the core, target their leadership, destroy their will to resist, and show them the price of defying the Xarn dominion." But even as he gave the order, a small voice of doubt whispered in the back of his mind. Could his forces truly wipe out the human spirit? Could they destroy the very heart of a species that, so far, had shown nothing but relentless defiance? The human war machine was evolving faster than the Xarn could anticipate, and every move they made now seemed to get one step closer to victory. Vorak Tel stood in front of the tactical display, his mind racing. The war was slipping from his control. For weeks, he had believed victory was inevitable, until the humans had shown him otherwise. Now, their tenacity was beginning to break his once unshakable resolve. The reports were clear. The Xarn were losing ground. After weeks of heavy bombardment and tactical strikes, the human resistance wasn't just holding out. It was gaining momentum. The Karn had underestimated the adaptability of Earth's people, and now the humans were taking the fight to the stars. "Commander," Cathar's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling Vorak out of his thoughts. "We've encountered an unexpected development. They've deployed something new. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Vorak Tel straightened up. "What are you talking about? What are these humans doing now?" Cathar hesitated before answering. "It's a weapon. A global weapon, and it's being activated as we speak. We've been unable to pinpoint its exact location, but it appears to be an electromagnetic pulse, massive in scale. It could disable all electronic systems within a vast radius." Vorak Tel's blood ran cold. An EMP was primitive by Xarn standards, but if the humans had somehow managed to develop one capable of crippling an entire fleet, it could spell disaster. "Activate countermeasures," Vorak ordered sharply, his mind already racing through potential solutions. "We have advanced shielding. This is a primitive attack." "We've already tried, Commander," Cathar interrupted. "Their EMPs are being deployed from hidden bunkers all over the planet. We cannot locate them fast enough. The pulse is too broad and powerful. The damage is already spreading." Vorak felt his jaw tighten. He had never imagined that a race so technologically inferior could even conceive of such a weapon, let alone deploy it with such precision. If the humans could blanket his fleet with an EMP, they could cripple his war machines, leaving them vulnerable. The next report that flashed across the screen made his blood run colder. "EMP interference has disabled 40% of our fleet's operational systems. The 17th and 25th Divisions have lost full communication. At least 20 ships are adrift." A silence hung in the air as Vorak processed the damage. For the first time since the war had begun, the Tarn were on the defensive. They were being hit by their own arrogance, the very belief that they were invincible. Cathar's voice was full of urgency. "Commander, we need to retreat. The EMPs are spreading, and our forces are vulnerable. We've underestimated the human ingenuity. This is no longer a fight we can win in the air." "Retreat," Vorak spat. "No, we will not be driven from this planet by a primitive weapon. We will adapt. We will overcome." But even as he spoke the words, doubt lingered in his mind. This was not just a test of strength anymore. It was a test of will, and the humans were proving to be the more formidable opponent. With a clenched fist, Vorak made a decision. "Deploy all remaining forces to Earth's surface. We will engage them directly. This war has dragged on long enough. If they think they can take us down with these primitive tactics, they will soon learn the true power of the Tarn." As he finished giving the orders, the thought gnawed at him once again. How much longer could they continue to fight? The humans weren't just surviving. They were evolving, constantly finding new ways to strike at the heart of the Xarn war machine. What was once a struggle for dominance had become a battle of survival. That Karn had underestimated the humans, and now, for the first time in Vorak Tel's career, he wasn't sure if they could win. But the battle was far from over. The humans had no idea what they were truly up against. Not yet. The ground campaign had begun in earnest. Vorak Tel's forces had launched a full-scale invasion of Earth's cities, targeting critical military hubs and strategic sites. But even as the Xarn war machine roared into action, it was clear the humans weren't folding. They had transitioned from desperate resistance to a more organized, more strategic war. Their tactics were no longer just a nuisance. They were a serious threat to the Xarn forces. Vorak Tel stood at the command center of the Vrithar, the map of Earth's surface flickering in front of him. It was a stark contrast to the victories that Karn had once celebrated so easily. The symbols of human resistance spread across the map like a virus, infecting every corner of the planet. What had once been isolated pockets of defiance were now full-fledged insurgencies, fighting with everything they had. "Commander, the 9th Division reports heavy losses in Paris." Cathar's voice came through, his tone heavy. "The human forces have set up extensive traps in the city's underground. We've lost contact with the entire Eastern Front. They've completely neutralized our air superiority in that region. Vorak-Tel's mandibles clicked in frustration. The humans had learned to fight with a resourcefulness that defied all expectation. Their guerrilla tactics were far from the disorganized resistance he had expected. They had taken advantage of every inch of their environment: underground bunkers, dense urban terrain, even abandoned factories, to outsmart and outmaneuver the Xarn. The Xarn were losing, and yet every fiber of Vorax being screamed that it wasn't possible. They had the numbers. They had the technology. They had every advantage. Why were the humans still holding out? "Commander," Cathar continued, his voice now tinged with doubt, "the global EMP pulses have intensified. The resistance has figured out how to adapt to our countermeasures. They're even using their own tech to scramble our frequencies and turn our weapons against us." Vorak-Tel's gaze hardened as he stared at the map. The humans were winning. Slowly, but they were winning. It wasn't just their weapons anymore. It was their spirit. They had taken what the Xarn saw as weakness, their fractured, chaotic world, and turned it into an unyielding force. They were fighting not just with weapons, but with a conviction that no enemy could shake. "Prepare the landing zones for full-scale deployment," Vorak barked, trying to force the situation back into his control. "We will wipe their cities off the map. We will break them in every way possible." But even as he issued the order, the sense of futility gnawed at him. His ships were damaged. His forces were stretched thin. And the humans, humanity itself, wasn't just surviving. They were growing stronger. As if to emphasize his thoughts, a new report flashed on the screen. "Commander," the officer said, his voice trained, "human forces have successfully breached our defenses near the Pacific Rim. They've taken out our forward bases, and we've lost control of the region. The resistance is now effectively coordinating across continents." Vorak's blood ran cold. "No," he muttered under his breath. They can't do this. They're not supposed to be able to do this." But it was happening. The humans were united, more so than the Xarn had ever anticipated. Where once they had been fractured, divided by their nations and cultures, they were now fighting as a single entity, pulling from every corner of the earth. "We've underestimated them," Cathar said quietly, more to himself than to Vorak. The words struck like a blade. Vorak-Tel had been so sure. The Xarn were unbeatable. But now, he was seeing something in humanity that made his heart race with a mix of awe and terror. They were a force of nature, a species that would not simply bend to the will of the Xarn. They had fought their own wars for centuries. They had survived and learned. And now they were using that to rip apart everything the Xarn had built. Vorak-Tel stood silent, the weight of the truth settling over him. They were at war with more than just a planet. They were at war with something much older, something that would never surrender. "Set a course for Earth's capital," Vorak finally ordered, his voice steady despite the churn of doubt in his mind. "This ends with their leadership. We'll take their command centers and crush their will to resist once and for all." But in his heart, a new fear had begun to take root. Could they still win? The Xarn forces were in full retreat. Vorak-Tel stood in the center of the Vrithar's command bridge, surrounded by his officers, as the latest reports flooded in. The tide had turned too far against them. Despite their overwhelming technological advantages, despite their superior numbers and firepower, the Xarn were being pushed back across Earth. The humans were relentless. "Commander," Cathar's voice was strained, "the resistance has begun a full mobilization. They're pushing us back on every front. The Pacific Rim, the European theater, they've even taken control of key resources in South America. Our supply lines are all but cut off. Our forces are on the brink of collapse." Vorak-Tel's mandibles clicked in frustration. "We can't afford this. We need to break them now, before they gain any more ground. Prepare the full assault on Earth's capital." "We've tried that," Cathar interrupted, his tone almost pleading. The humans have fortified every major city. Their capital, their underground networks, every facility is a stronghold. We'll lose hundreds, maybe thousands more if we continue this push. It's a slaughter. They're setting traps everywhere. Vorak glared at the map. The symbols of human resistance now spread like wildfire across the globe. The cities, once isolated pockets of human resilience, were now the heart of a coordinated global insurgency. The humans weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to preserve their very existence. A low hum echoed through the command center as an officer spoke up. "Sir, we've intercepted a message from Earth's Central Command. It's a final plea for peace." "Peace," Vorak barked, his voice cold. "Do they honestly believe after all this that they can negotiate with us?" Cathar gave him a hard look. "They're offering a surrender. They want a ceasefire, terms of conditional peace. We might be able to end this war without further bloodshed, Commander." Vorak's eyes narrowed, his mandibles clicking in annoyance. For a moment, he considered the offer. The humans were clearly at their breaking point. He could feel it in the reports, the desperation in their plea. But that very desperation was what made them dangerous. They had already proven time and again that they would not bow. They would fight until every last soul was extinguished, and then they would rise from the ashes to fight again. "We cannot allow them to believe they've won," Vorak said at last, his voice hard as stone. "We'll reject their surrender. We'll show them the true power of the Xarn." Cathar's expression shifted slightly, as though weighing the consequences of such an order. "Understood, Commander. But how much more can we endure? How much longer can we fight a battle where the enemy is everywhere?" Vorak's gaze lingered on the holographic map of Earth. For the first time, a seed of doubt took root deep within him. Could they still break the humans? Could they still win? His hand clenched into a fist. He had come too far, fought too hard to let the humans snatch victory from his grasp. Yet, a part of him feared they were at the edge of an abyss. "This war isn't over," he growled. "We'll strike them at the heart of their defenses. No more waiting. No more hesitation. We take their capital. We take their leaders. We make them see what happens when they challenge the Xarn dominion." His voice shook with conviction, but in his heart, he couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that the humans had already outplayed him. They had not just survived. They had thrived, adapting and overcoming at every turn. And now, the battle for Earth's future would come down to a single final confrontation, the last stand of the Xarn against a force of humanity that could not surrender. As the orders went out, and the final preparations for the assault began, Vorak wondered, for the first time, if the Xarn had made a fatal mistake in underestimating humanity. The air was thick with tension as Vorak stood before the massive window of the Vrithar, staring down at Earth's battered surface. The final assault was about to begin. The humans had no more cities to hide behind, no more hope of escape. The time had come to break them once and for all. But even now, the thought of what lay ahead stirred something deep within him, an unshakable sense of uncertainty. Their forces were massed, poised to strike at Earth's capital. Everything the Xarn had built in this campaign was now focused on one singular goal: to annihilate the last vestiges of human resistance. "Commander," Cathar's voice echoed in the command chamber. He stood behind Vorak, his posture stiff, his face unreadable. "The final battle begins in 1 hour. Our forces are in position. The human resistance has concentrated around the capital. We will make them pay for every last breath." Vorak didn't turn to face him. His eyes were locked on the chaotic landscape below. Shattered cities, devastated fields, and human resistance forces scurrying beneath the rubble. The planet was dying. The Xarn had left their mark, but so too had the humans. They had fought, bled, and refused to be conquered. "I know," Vorak said softly, his voice betraying none of the doubt that clouded his mind. "But this is different. This isn't just another planet. We fought countless species, but these humans, They've changed the rules of warfare. Cathar tilted his head, confused. They're nothing but vermin, Commander. We have crushed civilizations far greater than theirs. We've taken worlds without losing a fraction of the forces we've expended here. Why hesitate now? Voraktel's mandibles clicked with a mixture of anger and frustration. It's not hesitation. It's recognition. He turned to face his officer, his multiple eyes narrowing. I fought 1,000 battles, Cathar, but these humans have done something I never thought possible. They've shown me their greatest weapon. It's not their technology, their bombs, or their drones. It's their will. Their ability to keep fighting, to adapt, to survive. Cathar seemed to pause, processing the weight of his commander's words. His expression hardened. They will break. It's inevitable. They are cornered. We will crush them, as we always have. Perhaps, Voraktel replied. But I'm starting to think that when we break them, we'll have lost more than just this war. The final preparation was over. The Xarn fleet was descending to Earth, ready to make a decisive strike at the heart of the human resistance. For Voraktel, the battle had already begun within him. He knew the cost of their actions. No matter the outcome of this final confrontation, the war would leave a scar on Earth that could never heal. And perhaps that was the true victory for humanity. They had shown the Xarn that even a cornered species could rise to defy a conqueror. The ground shook as the first waves of Xarn forces began to land in the capital. Explosions rang out as the human resistance launched its final stand. But this time, Voraktel was not certain of victory. The city was alive with the sounds of defiance, with every human soldier, every citizen, fighting tooth and nail to protect their home. We have to end this now, Voraktel said, his voice cold but with a hint of weariness. Push forward. Take the command centers. His forces surged forward, but the human fighters were waiting. They had anticipated the Xarn's every move, utilizing the underground networks, hidden weapons caches, and civilians willing to die for their freedom. As the Xarn advanced, a wave of humanity surged up to meet them, not with superior weaponry, but with sheer willpower. The final battle wasn't won through power or technology. It was won through spirit, through the sheer determination to survive against all odds. In the chaos, Voraktel finally understood. It was not about the soldiers on the ground. It was about what they represented. Humanity's unwillingness to be crushed, its refusal to bend before an enemy. By the time the dust settled, the Xarn were retreating, not just from the capital, but from Earth itself. And as the remnants of the Xarn fleet retreated into space, Voraktel looked at the battered planet below. It had been a costly war. And though the Xarn had lost, the humans had won something far more valuable. The right to stand, to fight, and to live free. Voraktel's mind raced, realizing the humans had taught him the most brutal lesson of all. The greatest weapon in warfare was not force, but the unbreakable spirit of those who refused to surrender. And that, he knew, was a fatal error on his part.